people use a secure, great experience than an insecure, unstable experience that is ruled by a cult of personality. I think that this is a great product, and I think it's something that helps the space out. That's why we're building it with principles. And you know, if people want to integrate other systems, these are open ecosystems. So Vitalik can go put Ethereum, Dan can go put EOS into that, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. But that's my point, is that you have to think about the integration. You have to think about how do we get the permission system in and make that sustainable and economically viable, and then leverage that to bring the decentralized system, and then we'll bring in Cardano as the case study. And if other systems want to join, they will, and inevitably will. Always happens. Yes, sir, the functional programmer.
No, hello?
You're not working? Oh, sorry.
Never mind, so I will
There.
Yeah, so thank you for the talk. I would like to ask about your last point, which was about the governance. So I have two questions. One is, so I read the paper about the decentralized treasury, so kind of...
So you're like the fifth person to read it, out of everybody, right?
Yeah, but so what is next? And then, so in that sense, I can see a few things. I'm not sure if it even can be solved. So one is whether you even are asking the right question, you know, if you're formulating like in the right way. And second is if you can express your opinion. So for example, in Brexit, say vote, you had a yes or no. But many people, they were not really, like some people were like strongly yes or strongly no, but some people were, well, I'm kind of more inclined towards yes, but I'm not entirely against no. Someone would be, I'm more inclined towards yes, and I'm against no, and so on. So you don't have really this kind of like say binary option in the answer to that question and so on.
Right.
So and then second question is, will you know your CEO? So you talk about this like a problem of like centralization and so on. You're CEO of iohk. You present here the opinions, and so will you be dogfooding on some of the things that if you discover? Except for the treasury implementation in Cardano, but within the organization itself.
Right. So as the CEO of the company, I have to eventually fire myself from the ecosystem to avoid a cult of personality or too much centralization. And Satoshi did this, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate mic drop. He got everything started, got all the right people in place, left.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's the gold standard. You know, if you don't do it, you turn into Vitalik or Dan, and it's not pretty. And then eventually you turn into Craig Wright, and it's really not pretty. Good, bad, ugly. It's a good movie, by the way. So, no, McAfee's actually like it's the parabola. You're on the other side. You know, you become like a parody of yourself, and then you become enjoyable and funny. It's like not so harmful, except for when he shoots his neighbors. Nice guy, though. I think that all the time. Okay, so let's take some of the meat. That's a big, meaty, nice question. Okay, so with respect to voting, the voting system itself does have a lot to do with how people make decisions. So just looking at up, down, or left, right, or Hillary Clinton, Bush, Hillary Trump versus linear preference sorting would have dramatic differences on the structure. So you have conversative border counts, for example, where instead of saying I vote for Trump or I vote for Hillary, you say, these are my top 5 candidates. Top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4, and everybody ranks them. And then there's some way that you can converge. In the case of Borda, you can always, in Condorcet, usually, you can some way converge to a consensus that this is the person who won. Or use it as a series of runoffs to eventually winnow your way to a single candidate. Second, there's the notion of temporalness with voting. So this is a problem with Brexit. So you should not, for big decisions, just take one vote. What you should do is say, let's take a vote, we'll wait 6 months, and then we'll take another vote if that vote succeeds, as an example. Now, in the case of Brexit probably would have failed on the second time, because people have started realizing the consequences of it, and how significant and serious this is for the economy, and people are already planning to leave and so forth, and they would reevaluate and say, maybe this isn't as good of an idea as we thought. On the other hand, maybe they'll double down, in which case the politicians know that people are really serious.
That's you.
Oh, excuse me. All right, so you have a linear preference sorting connection, and then you also have a temporal connection. Then you also go down to who's actually voting. What is the voting class? So the Treasury paper was trying to introduce this concept of liquid democracy, of delegation, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look even at just the Bitcoin space itself, the vast majority of people in the Bitcoin space would probably end up delegating people they like. Andreas Antonopoulos is a great example. most people trust him in this space. A lot of people love him. They read Mastering Bitcoin. They watch his lectures. And he's a great communicator. Some people hate him. Some people love him. But of his fans, a lot of them would end up giving their power and their voice to him because they say, he's the guy. We trust him. Right? So that would naturally happen. And you'd end up creating a professional political class in your system. Whether you like it or not, we implicitly or explicitly do it. We have the Rush Limbaughs and the Glenn Becks and the Ben Shapiros, and on the left they have their AOCs and these other people that we invest a lot of trust, faith, and reason in, and when they say something, we just tend to vote the way they vote. So they're, okay, we can't give them our vote technically, but spiritually they have it, and we just follow their lead. Humans do this. We're very tribal in that respect. So I think it's a really good idea to build explicit facilitation of delegation of vote and allow a political class to materialize, and then create incentives for that political class. For example, if you had a treasury system, then you could have Andreas say, I want to go around the whole world and just talk about Bitcoin and write books about Bitcoin. Pay me $500,000, I'll do it. And his fans will say yes, and he'll probably get it. So now he's working for the system. He's an agent of the system. And his financial incentives are pure. They're directly connected to the sustainability, health, and growth of that system. Or in other words, the money he's being paid isn't worth as much as he wants it to be, right? So incentive alignment, after you've created these people, is a really good idea, okay? Now, are you there? No. You also need to have productive engagement. So meetup groups are a great example. So here's the problem right now with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and these other systems. You have developers, and you have people who are doing real things, and that's about that big. Then you have speculators. It's about that big, right? And what can speculators do? Buy and hold. Maybe short sell, maybe use options if they're in certain exotic markets. But by and large, do I sell, do I buy? When move? All they can do. So what kind of conversation can they have? When do you think we're going to move? When do you think we're going to move? You over there, what about you? You think we're going to move? Well, I'm going to lose all my money. That's the conversation they can have. But if you have a treasury system, then all of a sudden now the meetup group is much different. They're going to be like, did you read the latest ballot? Some guy wants to put ATMs in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa. Is that a good idea? Are you talking about moon? No. You're talking about something real. Is this person credible? Do we support this? Is this something we do? It's like bike shedding, but it's productive. It's productive because now that investor class suddenly has a voice and they can do something. What does that mean? Instead of when the big fork comes, like how do we move from A or B? Should we go big block or SegWit? Instead of that being a huge discussion all at once where vast majority of people were left behind and suddenly they have to do something, they've already been discussing it in micro bits because they probably ended up funding it or rejected the funding of it somewhere along the way. So my conjecture, we don't know this empirically, but my conjecture is the very fact that a treasury system exists and is connected in some way to people who are financially vested in the system is probably going to end up creating micro discussions that can aggregate to creation of a political class in the system and will inevitably allow us to actually have more productive conversations about the upgrading of the system. This is the grand experiment. So there's a technical side to this in that we need enough go juice in the protocol, enough infrastructure to be able to even do this. And then there's a sociological, political, mechanism designy, game theoretically, economic side to this, which is unknown. And we'll run it. We'll see what happens. And if we fail, that's okay. Because we can basically find a way to make it better, and at least everybody's aligned along the same goal set, which is we want to run the system without somebody in charge. And here's the real mindfuck, the thing that really just good, it changes your whole view of the world once you realize this. If this works, it's not just for Cardano. It's for your company and eventually for your country. If this works, you can get rid of your president. Okay, so that's a really powerful thing. It's a very dangerous thing, but it's a really exciting thing. It's the government of the 21st century. We've been slowly doing this over time, little by little, not even realizing we're doing it. Because, in a way, it's almost like a sinkhole. Sinkholes don't start top down. They actually occur bottom up, and then the car comes by and it falls into this big hole. So, until the very second before you fall into the hole, you think the road's fine. And you don't realize for the last 5 years that this hole's been growing. There is no greater example of this sociologically than and politically than this great picture that happened at King Henry's funeral. He was a monarch in England. I think it was 1910 or something like that, very shortly before World War I. He dies, and he's related to everyone in Europe. So what happens when you're a king and you're related to every other royalty in Europe? Everybody just shows up for your funeral. It's a big party. Maybe if they didn't like him, they'll drink extra hard. But anyway, everybody shows up. So there's this beautiful picture. It's actually on my Twitter page, on my banner, of all these kings of Europe, super powerful people, the Kaiser and others. And they had real power. They led armies. They led about a third of the damn world. What happened to them after the end of World War I, just 10 years later? Almost all of them had been depowered and deposed. Did that just happen because of a singular event? No. There was a sociological sinkhole effect occurring, where little by little, they didn't even realize it. Their power and their mandate and their prestige had been eroded away. And their car was heading right towards that sinkhole. And World War I was the event that caved in that last part. So that is where we're at. There is a huge worldwide demand for better governance. You know, this is why the American political system is so badly shattered. Trump is a symptom. He's not the cause. All right? And it's similarly, Brexit is a symptom. It's not the cause of these issues. The Arab Spring is a symptom. It's not the cause. We're not used to globalism. We're not used to instantaneous information. We're not used to everybody being equal in society. We're used to kings and hierarchies and controlled flows of information. That's how it was done for a very long time, since any of us were born. And then suddenly now we're living in a world where we've ripped the curtain back and we can all see how it really works. And we're realizing it's not fair, it's not honest, and a lot of people are getting screwed. And that means we're due for a change. So cryptocurrencies are just a very natural response to that. They're not the only response, but they're a natural response to it. And what we're doing here is seeing if we can harness some of that desire to try to steer this in a direction where we can build a sustainable ecosystem. And that's a data point and a series of data points which will inevitably allow us to reconstruct the DNA of society. All right, how about one more?
I want to know when can I have the Cardano wallet in my handphone? And the second one, in the second question, you have some unsatisfied with someone in Cardano Foundation group before. Is this still a problem up to now?
So those are great questions, good questions to close it. And this actually shows you the courage and resilience of our ecosystem. So I'll answer the Cardano Foundation first. What happened was that we're a truly independent ecosystem. So Emergo is independent of iohk, independent of Cardano Foundation. So it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it means that I can't influence them and tell them what to do. I can't go to Ken and say, you do this, and can't go to Nathan and say, you do this. But it also means that when people aren't behaving well, I don't have a lot of power to correct that. So the problem with Michael Parsons is that the foundation had a laundry list of things it was supposed to do. Exchange listings, marketing, community management, help desk. And Michael just woke up one day and decided that he didn't want to do any of these things. And the problem was that the board went from several people through attrition down to basically him and Pascal Smith. So we weren't in a position legally to force Michael to either do his job or get out of the way and let someone else do that job. So Ken and I, we decided to write an open letter to the community and create community pressure for Michael to do the right thing and leave. And it took a lot of courage. It's very difficult to tell the world that mommy and daddy want to break up and air grievances. And we took some criticism. There was obviously Tezos comparisons. But the difference was that they were never in a position to control my funding. And second, we didn't pay Michael to leave. He left of his own free will, unlike Tezos where they had to pay Johan to go. So Michael's gone. Nathan Kaiser came in as an interim chairman, and he's kind of fixing the fundamental problems of that organization. First, there were some complaints filed against Parson through ASA, and the foundation has to clear all that, and it's almost done with it. And also Parsons didn't file any of the paperwork and other things he was supposed to do. So all that has to be cleaned up and fixed, and Nathan's a Swiss lawyer. He understands how these things work. And there's a good board of people. Manmeet Singh from Emergo's on it. Domino is an independent person who's in Switzerland, and then Nathan's general counsel of iohk. Actually, he's been in Taiwan, Hong Kong for 20 years, and before that he was in Switzerland, and he's currently a fellow at Harvard, Berkman Klein Center. So he's a very smart guy. Now, over time, they'll install a better governance system, and this will fully fix the foundation's grievances. And we've already seen major improvements. For example, they're funding the Cardano Ambassador program so that people can actually start becoming community evangelists and set up those meetup groups which will make decisions. And second, they're going to eventually fund the Cardano Hub program so that small little micro foundations can be created to carry out the mission of the foundation. They're starting to take over exchange listings. They're starting to take over the help desk. They're starting to do things that we had to do and Ken had to do over at Emergo, which we weren't paid to do, but we did because it was the right thing to do and it was necessary to do. And so we're starting to actually see progress. It will take some time for it to get where it needs to go because Michael sat on his hands for a while. Now, also, we have to rewrite the DNA of the foundation so we can never have a Michael Parsons issue. But here's the thing, is that it shows you already that we're a pretty resilient ecosystem if we can have one of the core companies just decide to not do its job for 2 years and we can still make a lot of progress. That's a good sign. It means fundamentally that the structure is sound, and it also means that we can bounce back when bad things happen. The reason why people trust Bitcoin so much is because Bitcoin's been through a lot. It went through Silk Road and Mt. Gox and all these other terrible things, yet it's still here. And we all know the price will go back up. We all know the ecosystem will recover. We all know it'll continue being Bitcoin. No one thinks it's just going to go away. It's here to stay, it's permanent. All those Bitcoin tattoos on people's bodies will keep them Bitcoin evangelists for a long time. And there's some people with Daedalus tattoos on their bodies. So I can never change the logo. Okay? Or I'll get some very angry people. Okay, so we'll get there. And there's a lot of lessons we learned, and there was some optimism and idealism and trust and broken promises, and that's just how it is. And, you know, frankly, if this is the worst we face as an ecosystem, I'd be a happy, happy man. But I think we've got some bigger challenges ahead. Now, second, your question about a physical ETA wallet. The Tangem wallet, the first actual distribution that's going to happen is going to happen at the iohk Summit in Miami, April 17th to 18th. Love to have you guys there if you can make it. CCR and Steve Miller-Band is playing. We also have Stephen Wolfram, the founder of Mathematica. He's talking, and my entire company is going to be there, so it's going to be a lovely time. But anyway, levity aside, that card will be distributed there and then probably available for sale from Tangem or through independent distributors fairly shortly thereafter. It's somewhere in the $5 to $15 price point is what we hope for. And it'll work on Android devices. You can check your balance on an Apple device, but NFC only works one way, so you can't spend from an Apple device. That's an Apple restriction, unfortunately. But you can spend on any Android device with those wallets. And that's just one of many hardware devices that are supporting Cardano. Ledger support will be out thanks to Emergo very, very soon. We already have Trezor support, that's out. And there's other devices that are inevitably going to enter our ecosystem at different price points. The high-end $300, $400 price point, all the way down to Tangem, which is kind of the cheapest price point that we anticipate. There's also mobile wallets available. Yoroi is now on Apple, and it's also on Android devices. So you can download that today. You can use that today. It's a great, secure, efficient experience. If you're a Chrome user, one-click install. You can have Yoroi on your browser, or you can download Daedalus. And there are other wallets that are starting to support us. We talked to Eric Voorhees and Shapeshift. We'll get support at some point, and they actually own KeepKey, which is another trusted hardware device, and they have a DEX with KeepKey. So as soon as ADA is supported there, we'll be on KeepKey, Shapeshift, and through a DEX, so a decentralized exchange. So those are coming as well. So that's the cool part. When you actually start getting momentum, you speed up, and you start getting more and more listing. Like we started 2017, we were listing on one exchange. Now we're on 25. It just keeps scaling. So the ball's really rolling. Well, anyway, thank you all for coming.
Okay, thanks, Charles. I got your phone right here.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. We actually did get one question from a Twitter live stream. Jossie from the Netherlands says, wouldn't you prefer a more comfortable chair? So, I don't know how you want to answer that. Any thoughts? Or?
You know what they used to call Richard Nixon when he was at Duke University, the School of Law?
No.
Called him Iron Ass. Because he had these super uncomfortable wooden desks at the library, and he would go there after his classes and just sit there for like 6 and 7 hours straight. He was wearing a suit and tie because he's Richard Nixon. He's awkward as hell. And he's like iron spine, iron ass, and he would just study. So ever since I heard that, I aspired to be Nixon in that respect.
How's it going so far? How's the progress?
Oh, it's great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.